Okay, good morning, everybody. The time is 10:02, and I call the May 25th, 2023 Planning Board meeting to order. We are joined by Vice Chair Bailey, Commissioner Washington, Commissioner Dorner, and Commissioner Giraldo.
Good morning.
I am Chair Shapiro. On to the business at hand. Please note that the deadline for all participant pre-registration and for all submission of materials and exhibits was 12 noon on the Tuesday before this Planning Board meeting. Registered speakers may join the meeting with the link provided in the email provided by the Planning Board office or listen by phone by utilizing the call-in number provided in the email. Of course, anyone may tune in to watch the Planning Board meeting via live stream, and if you wish to speak or become a person of record, you may use our online web form. As always, you can see that reference on the screen before you. In addition to our commissioners, we are joined by Delisa Coleman, our senior counsel, Jessica Jones, our Planning Board administrator, Joe Parsons, the Senior Technical Hearing Writer, James Hunt, the Division Chief for the Development Review Division. And we have staff members Kenneth Flanagan and Ryan Crown, who are helping us with technology behind the scenes quite ably as always. With that, let's move on to the first item. Our first item, we have 3 resolutions of appreciation. All 3 are for folks, I am sad to say, who are retiring. So let me just give you a little bit of background about these folks. The first one is Daniel Sarr. He is a mechanic with Prince George's Department of Parks and Recreation. He's retiring effective May 31st after 22 years of service. He has performed a full range of automotive and equipment, mechanical work, maintenance on vehicles, major and minor repairs on cars and trucks and various equipment, all the things that help keep Parks and Rec running. We extend a happy retirement, Daniel, and we wish him the very best in his next adventures. Next one is Raul Bechtold, an electrician with the Department of Parks and Recreation, who is retiring also effective May 31st after 29 years of service in multiple roles. He has maintained and ensured electrical safety regulation requirements throughout commission buildings and facilities. All sorts of ways in which he has helped the commission be effective. And we extend him as well a happy retirement and wish him the best. And finally, I'm sad to say that we are celebrating the retirement of Terry Johnson. Terry is also effective May 31st. He's more than 30 years of service. Mr. Johnson has started as an accounting technician and was promoted on multiple occasions in accountant 1, 2, and 3, and administrative specialist 3, worked briefly with our commission colleagues in Montgomery. As well, he helped the planning department successfully navigate through the budget process, and he appeared regularly before us over the years. He has delivered countless presentations quite professionally and ably. He's contributed greatly to the commission's annual budget process, and he has done a number of presentations to the Prince George's County Council. We all thank Terry for his leadership. I want to personally thank Terry for his leadership and his dedication to the Commission and Prince George's County over the years, and we wish Terry a happy retirement as well. So with that, Commissioners, unless there's things that you all want to add, I would look for a motion to approve these 3 resolutions.
Move to approve, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to all, and especially Mr. Jones. We will certainly miss him during our annual budgeting process.
Indeed.
Thank you. And I share in Commissioner Washington's comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Giraldo. We've got a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Commissioner Giraldo. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
I vote aye, and congratulations, and thank the individuals for their service.
Thank you, and I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 5-0. Thanks to all. Next item on our agenda is draft minutes for May 18, 2023. Look for a motion to approve.
Motion to approve draft minutes.
Second.
Got a motion by Vice Chair Bailey, a second by Commissioner Washington. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Washington.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Geraldo.
I vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it. 5-0. We have our consent agenda. We have only one item on the consent agenda. Is there anyone who wishes to oppose the staff's recommendation or any board member who wishes to discuss the item? If not, I'd look for a motion to adopt the consent agenda, to approve the consent agenda.
Move approval of the item on the consent agenda in accordance with the recommendation of staff.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Motion by Vice Chair Bailey, second by Commissioner Geraldo. Discussion. I'll call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Geraldo.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Washington.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
I vote as well. The ayes have it. 5-0. We will move on to our first regular agenda item. This is item 5. DSP detailed site plan, DSP 22032 Yamans Estates. We have Mr. Perez who's representing the applicant. I believe we do have somebody registered to speak in opposition. This is considered an evidentiary hearing. So we're requiring all those intending to provide testimony to take an oath. So at this time, I would ask all people who are intending to provide testimony to raise their right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth? I don't hear anything, but I think I see a head nod with a hand raised. So we'll take that as a yes. So consider yourself sworn in. We have Mr. Price, who will be giving the staff presentation. And let me turn it over to staff. Mr. Hunt, am I turning it over to you first?
Yes, sir. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Board. For the record, I'm James Hunt with the Development Review Division. It's no secret that for the past few years, not only the Planning Department, but most agencies have seen where we've had a lot of people retire, just like Chairman Shapiro mentioned earlier, along with a lot of promotions that have taken place. It's kind of unheard of to be able to come before you today to say we've got 2 new planning employees that we're going to introduce to you today. The first of which is Mr. Todd Price. He is a planner 2 within the zoning section of the Development Review Division. He comes from the private sector for about 25 years of experience as a senior planner with the private sector. He started out with Phoenix Land Design across the lakeside here within Upper Marlboro. Later, he moved to Anne Arundel County and now working for our Prince George's County Planning Department. One fun fact is one of his first pre-application meetings that he had was with someone he worked with where he first started with Phoenix Land Design. So it was really odd for him to be on both sides with that person. So just wanted to add the opportunity to introduce Mr. Price to you today.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. Mr. Price, welcome aboard. We are so glad you joined us. We're looking forward to working with you.
Great. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you.
And with that, I will turn it over to you for the staff presentation on this DSP. Take it away.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Board. For the record, I am Todd Price with the Urban Design section. This is item 5, DSP-22032 and TCP2-011-2023 for Yamans Estates, requesting approval of a single-family detached dwelling. As Bryan Point Road has been designated a scenic road per CR-113-1992, a DSP for this development is a condition of the approved preliminary plan of subdivision 4-06017. This application has been reviewed and evaluated in accordance with the prior zoning ordinance. Staff would like to acknowledge administrative corrections to the technical staff report. On pages 2 and 6, the preliminary plan of subdivision is referred to as 4-21017. The correct reference is 4-06017. Staff would like to acknowledge a technical error in the memorandum from Environmental Planning dated April 25th, 2023. On page 1, the subject property is referred to as 940 Bryan Point Road. The correct address is 490 Bryan Point Road. Next slide, please. The property is located in Council District 9, Planning Area 83 in the southwest portion of the county. Next slide, please. The subject property is located on Bryan Point Road, approximately 1,400 feet east of the intersection with Farmington Road. The property address is 490 Bryan Point Road, Accokeek, Maryland. Next slide, please. The subject property is currently zoned RR. The prior zoning was also RR. Next slide, please. Subject property is not subject to an overlay map. Next slide. This aerial shows the subject property to be currently wooded and undeveloped. The property is bounded to the east and west by undeveloped lots. To the north, beyond Bryan Point Road, is an existing church. To the south is Dyer Road and single-family homes. Next slide, please. The site map shows the subject property to be vegetated with topography sloping gently to the north. Next slide, please. This map shows the subject property's proximity to Farmington Road to the west, Livingston Road to the south, and Maryland 210 to the east. Next slide. The detailed site plan shows the proposed dwelling, the proposed driveway, and the stormwater management facilities. Stormwater management concept approval was issued by DPI on February 14th, 2023. Next slide, please. The landscape plan depicts the proposed on-siting plantings associated with the proposed development. Next slide, please. This slide shows the Type 2 tree conservation plan associated with the development. Next slide, please. This slide shows a rendering of the front elevation of the proposed single-family dwelling with full brick front, shutters, and different brick course and keystone around windows and entryway. Next slide, please. This slide shows the front, side, and rear elevations of the proposed single-family dwelling. Next slide, please. The Urban Design section recommends the Planning Board adopt the findings of this report and approve DSP-22032 and TCP2-011-2023 with conditions found in the staff report. The applicant has reviewed the technical staff report and is in full agreement. Staff is aware that there is opposition to this development and are prepared to address any inquiries. This concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Well done. Commissioners and Mr. Price, we understand that Megan Grigger, if she speaks, which I assume she will, we've seen the PowerPoint presentation in our backup. You see some issues around stormwater. So you may want to be prepared to answer some questions about that after we hear from Ms. Grigger. Commissioners, any other questions for staff before we turn to the applicant, and then we'll hear from folks in the community? No questions, then we will turn to the applicant, Mr. Perez. Turn it over to you if you could introduce yourself for the record and take it away.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Chairman Shapiro and members of the Planning Board. For the record, my name is Milton Perez. I am an urban planner with Capital Development Design, Inc., the engineers and planners working on this project. As already stated by Mr. Todd Price, the detailed site plan for Yaman's Estate Lot 2, DSP 22032, is a revalidation from the expired DSP 06091 approved in 2007. The current DSP 22032 does not deviate or offer anything different from the previously approved DSP. In addition to all previous and current requirements, CDDI has surveyed all the existing streets along Bryan Point Scenic Easement to minimize the removal of any unnecessary trees due to the driveway access to the property. This extra step to preserve the scenic easement integrity has yielded the desired result, since only one tree will be removed due to the proposed limit of disturbance for the construction of the driveway. We at CDDI have worked closely with MNCPPC to make sure that condition 7 of the preliminary plan of subdivision 4-06017 is addressed and implemented during the design and construction phase of the single-family dwelling project. By the same token, the Garcia's family, the applicant, our client, has remained engaged and mindful of the requirements of the DSP 22032 and has patiently waited so the property comply with all the requirements, not only from MNCPPC, but also from the Department of Permitting and Inspection Enforcement, DPI. If I may, I would like to briefly introduce the Garcia's family to the members of the board and any community member present. Joel and Lynette Garcia have been married 8 years and just relocated from Yonkers, New York to Waldorf, Maryland in anticipation of their newly constructed home at 490 Bryan Point Road, Accokeek, Maryland. The couple recently welcomed a baby girl in December of 2022 and are excited that she will be raised in Prince George's County with family nearby in Calvert County. Joel is a registered respiratory therapist who has fulfilling career treating and rehabilitating ICU patients with severe respiratory infections such as COVID-19 and RSV. Lynette is an independent consultant who partners with premier healthcare systems and hospitals to implement innovative clinical technology to improve patients' outcomes. She volunteers as a technical lead with a nonprofit youth organization focused on introducing young girls to computer programming fundamentals. The couple enjoys international travel, nature walks, martial arts, and participating in community events. The Garcia family first began planning their move to Maryland in 2018. After a couple years of monitoring the house market, they decided to build a new home and set out to research development and purchase a lot. They were excited to settle on the 0.46 acre lot at Jammans Estates after 3 different attempts were made by the family to acquire suitable land to develop their dream home failed. The settlement of the dream property occurred in January of 2022, but the dream was cut short when they found out that the ESP 06091 had expired and it needed to be revalidated. Since then, the family eagerly awaits for the approval of DSP 22032 and the construction of the new home to begin. During this time, CDDI developed a great relationship with the Garcia's family, and we believe that they will be a great addition to the Accokeek community as they look forward to meeting and getting to know their local neighbors. With that, we would like to thank the staff, and we will respectfully request your support for this application. Based on the staff report, there is only one condition of approval. Our client agrees with the condition, so we do. Our team is here to answer any questions that you may have regarding the detailed site plan. We do appreciate your consideration. Again, we are here to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions to the applicant? And thank you for the family introduction. That was nice. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
There's no questions. Let's turn to folks from the community. We have one person who signed up to speak. Megan Krieger, are you on the line?
I am.
Okay. Again, this is an evidentiary hearing. So were you sworn in? I didn't hear or see you. Ms. Krieger?
Yes. I swear to tell the truth.
So when I swore in, were you part of this swearing in? Did you hear that? And did you affirm this swearing in, or should I read you the oath right now?
You can redo it now.
Okay. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Consider yourself sworn in, Ms. Krieger. Okay. Again, we received the PowerPoint presentation that you have as backup, and we're looking forward to hearing your concerns, and we'll make sure that we get good response to that during the course of this. You have up to 3 minutes to speak, Ms. Krieger, and the floor is yours. If you could introduce yourself and state your name and address for the record, of course.
Sure. My name is Megan Krieger. I live at 14512 Leonard Calvert Drive, Accokeek, Maryland. And I'm speaking out about DSP 22032.
Thank you. Please continue.
Can my slides be shown?
We are working on it right now, Ms. Krieger. This won't count against your time, and we're working on the technology to make sure we can get your slides up. Give us just about 30 seconds here.
Okay, I'll begin then. Good morning, and thank you for allowing me to speak at this hearing. My name is Megan, and myself and my husband live downstream from the development in question. One reason we oppose the development in this area is due to the possibility of disturbing the resting place of the dead. Another reason we oppose the development of this area, yeah, that's the slide I'm on, thank you. Another reason we also oppose the development of this area is due to the hardship this development will cause for the future homeowner, the surrounding and existing homeowners, as well as homeowners downstream from the development like us. Related and equally important is this development will cause a destruction of an area of environmental importance. Next slide, please. Why is this area environmentally important? This area holds a substantial amount of water and serves as a forested bioretention area upstream from a stream that runs directly behind our house. In fact, only 40 feet from our house. Next slide, please. If this development is approved, you would be removing vegetation that is absorbing all of the water. You would also be adding a large amount of impervious surfaces in the form of roof and driveways. All of this will increase the amount of stormwater significantly. Next slide, please. It appears that the stormwater plan was initially approved in 2004. Next slide, please. Development in the immediate area has increased since then. As such, the amount of stormwater has increased. Next slide, please. We are currently in a drought, so you won't see the area flooding. However, when we are not in a drought, I have witnessed the water reaching within 5 feet of the house highlighted in red. Next slide, please. Throughout this watershed, water is being piped and accelerated directly into an already eroding stream. Next slide, please. This is another view of the slopes in the area where you can see how water is flowing directly into the stream. Next slide, please. Our county is touted as the birthplace of bioretention in the 1990s. This article is from a newspaper across the country in Oregon in 2019, and credited the county as a birthplace of bioretention and rain gardens. And within the same article had this quote. Next slide, please. The world has changed, a hydraulic engineer stated. We now have computers. We don't have typewriters, right? We've gone from putting stormwater into pipes and getting it out of here as fast as we can to also thinking about not flooding the downstream property owner, to instead getting the water into the ground and removing pollutants before it gets into the riverine system. Next slide, please. Why has the county gone from inventing bioretention in the 90s to now piping water directly into the streams? This photo is upstream from us on Farmington Road West. You can see where a forest was cleared and water is being piped directly into the stream. Next slide, please. This is upstream and next door to us. A large amount of the forest was removed along the stream. Impervious surfaces were added along the stream bank. 2 new channels were added, one with a large concrete swale, another on the other side with 2 culverts and the water passing through compacted turf which absorbs as much as concrete. Next slide, please. The stream is no longer shaded and we can physically see the quality of the water has diminished. A stream section head from DNR has told us that we will see additional erosion specifically because of this. Next slide, please. As mentioned, we live downstream from the development and where stormwater runoff enters an eroding stream near our house. There is a cliff or a cut bank only 40 feet from our home. Our home was built in 1951 and development over the years has degraded the stream from a large amount of stormwater runoff. This photo is from 2020. The piping projects from 2021 and the erosion have only gotten worse since then. Next slide, please. And this final slide is a video, which I don't know if you can show, but showing all of the stormwater from a rain event in July of last year. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Kruger. Appreciate all the work that you put into this and appreciate you bringing this to our attention. So let us, Commissioners, is there any questions for Ms. Kruger? Happy to entertain them. And after that, I want to hear from staff and hear from the applicant about how they intend to be addressing some of these issues around stormwater management. I believe there's some answers for that. But first, any questions for Ms. Kruger? Okay, so let's hear from staff first. And if you can talk about what you understand about how stormwater is being addressed, runoff is being addressed on this project.
Yes, this site has a approved stormwater management concept from DPI that was approved on February 14th of 2023. If you go to the detailed site plan, you will see that there are 3 dry wells that collect stormwater from rooftop. Those are in the southwest and to the southeast. These dry wells will treat stormwater. So I think any concerns of impervious surfaces adding to runoff will be controlled by the approved stormwater plan.
Thank you, Mr. Price. The applicant, Mr. Perez, anything you want to add to that?
Yes, I do. For the record, Milton Perez with CDDI, Capital Development Design Inc. Yes, like Mr. Price, already stated, yeah, there is a new stormwater management council approval. This stormwater management council was approved February 14, 2023. Indefinitely, and this is not so much different from the previous stormwater management approval. And the fact is that, the site contains really good soils and it's really, the percolation is really good. In the site, there is a little bit of clay, silt, and sand. It's a good combination of soils. And that's the reason that the stormwater management concept only provides dry infiltration dry wells, because whatever runoff we're going to have on the property is going to be taken care of from the these facilities, and the fact that the soil is good. I believe the house in the proposed driveway are very, are they going to the impervious area are going to be minimum, and it's not going to definitely affect, the entire parcel area or lot area on this. So I guess that's all what I can say about the stormwater management approval concept plan. It's a really simple plan, just the fact that we actually have a good soils, especially on that area. Oh, and by the way, the groundwater table, is low. So that's a plus, for a single family home. So with that, I'll turn it to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perez. Commissioners, any questions for staff or for the applicant? Okay. We have no one else who signed up to speak. I'm glad that, hopefully Ms. Prager's concerns will be taken care of. It sounds like there's a fairly robust plan to address stormwater runoff, and I'm glad to hear that. So with that, if there's no one signed up to speak, I'm going to close.
Chairman.
Mr. Hunt, yeah.
I apologize. For the record, James Hunt with the Development Review Division. I think Mrs. Krieger mentioned regarding burials on site and some concerns there. Under the 12A of the referral comments in the staff report, it does indicate where the historic preservation section requested a condition be added to this staff report or to this site plan regarding contacting their office if burial remains were found. And so we would need to add that condition into this staff report. So I would request that we add that condition in here in accordance to address that particular issue as it was raised.
Thank you for that, Mr. Hunt. Thanks for flagging that. Okay, thank you. So I'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, you've heard from staff, you've heard from the applicant, some opposition as well. I'm fine to move this forward from my perspective, including the condition that Mr. Hunt laid out. Commissioners, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the findings of staff to include the administrative and technical corrections as noted by staff at the top of his presentation, and approve DSP-22032 and TCP2-011-2023, along with the conditions as outlined in staff's report, in addition to the added condition with regards to the historic preservation's recommendation with regards to burial sites.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Commissioner Giraldo. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing
Just to
none, I'll call
welcome
the-
I would just like to welcome Mr. Price and congratulate him on his first presentation, in addition to welcoming the Yamans to Prince George's County.
Well said on both counts. Thank you. I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington,
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo,
I vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner,
Vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 5-0. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Next case, we have item 6 on our agenda is detailed site plan, DSP 21039 Goodman Heights. We have Mr. Haller, who's representing the applicant. We have Emery Huang, who's going to be giving the staff presentation. I believe we'll keep hear from Mr. Hunt as well. I don't think we have anyone who's signed up in opposition to this one now. So is there anyone I need to swear in on this one? Mr.
There are two members
Howard?
of my team that are prepared to testify if necessary, and they should be sworn in, Mr. Herrick and Mr. Wolford.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. So, Mr. Herrick, Mr. Wolford, you are here. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, I heard 2 yeses. Consider yourself both sworn in. And let me turn to staff for the presentation. I'm going to turn to Mr. Hunt first.
Again, Mr. Chair, thank you, James Hunt, for the record. Mr. Tusheng Emery Wang holds a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in architecture from Taiwan. He received his PhD in urban systems from New Jersey Institute of Technology and Rutgers in Rutgers, Newark. Prior to joining the commission, he served at the Baltimore County Department of Planning in Towson. And a fun fact about him is that he wrote a book and he edited a book, with Karen Frank, which was published in March of this year, titled Rutledge Handbook of Urban Public Space. This book comprises 26 chapters with empirical cases from 11 countries and 5 continents. Everyone, please welcome Mr. Emery Wang.
Wrong, nice to.
Could have just a point of privilege. Anytime somebody went to Rutgers, Newark, I got to give them a high five.
I knew that was coming. I knew that was coming.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And I've seen you around the office. It's good to see you again, and we're looking forward to your presentation and to working with you. So thank you, and take it away. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. First, I hope you guys can hear me, and thank you for having me. Good morning, Mr. Chair, Shapiro, and member of the Planning Board. For the record, I'm Emery Huang with the Urban Design section, filling in for Dominic Lockhart. Item number 6 on the agenda is detailed site plan DSP-21039, titled Goodman Heights, which proposes the construction of the recreational facilities owned and operated by a homeowners association. The recreational facility will serve the development of 28 one-family detached dwellings The plan proposes a 2,400 square foot playground, a 10-foot wide asphalt pedestrian trail, 11 seating areas, and 1 U-shaped bike rack. The pedestrian trail will encircle the stormwater management facility pond. The applicant has provided recommended condition as a part of their exhibit, which is included in the additional backup. Staff has reviewed the revisions and is in agreement with the proposed conditions. Based on the findings presented in the technical staff report, staff recommended that planning board approves detailed site plan DSP-21039 and associated type 2 tree conservation plan TCP2-032-07-02 subject to the revised condition. This concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Commissioners, questions for staff? No questions. We'll turn to the applicant, Mr. Haller. Floor is yours. You can introduce your team and take it away.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Board. Thomas Haller, an attorney with offices in Largo on behalf of the owner and applicant in this case. I have with me today Mr. Scott Herrick, who's one of the principals of the ownership entity, as well as Mr. Scott Wolford, who's with Collier Engineering and who is the engineer on this project. As Mr. Wong mentioned, this is a small 28-lot subdivision. When the property was originally subdivided, there were recreational facilities proposed to be provided within the subdivision. Section 27445 of the prior ordinance requires that when recreational facilities are proposed, that a detailed site plan is required, and this detailed site plan is filed to fulfill that requirement. The recreational facilities that are proposed are essentially the same recreational facilities that were approved at the time of the preliminary plan. This detailed site plan provides the details for those facilities. We have reviewed the staff report and the staff's findings and recommendations, and we agree with them with some minor revisions that are included in our proposed revisions to conditions, which were forwarded to the planning board earlier this week, and staff is in agreement with those revisions. I and my team are happy to answer any questions that you have with regard to the revised conditions. But that would conclude my presentation unless the board wants more details regarding our revised conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Haller. We may have some questions from commissioners. I don't know, maybe there's a dog park related question in terms of what amenities are going to be provided. Any questions from commissioners?
I was just going to ask about that, whether or not there's a dog park. And if not a dog park, how about doggy waste stations for the community?
And Mr. Commissioner Giraldo, I anticipated that question, and you will note that in proposed revision to condition 1I, we are proposing to add dog waste stations. We don't have a separate designated dog park, but we do have a trail system around the stormwater management facility, and we are adding dog waste stations around that around the trail system.
Wonderful. Thank you. Nothing further.
EP.
Any other questions for the applicant, Commissioner? And thank you for your preemptive responsiveness, Mr. Haller. We appreciate it. There's no one signed up to speak on this. Commissioners, there's no other questions for the applicant, and there's no questions for staff. I will close this hearing, and I will turn it back over to you. What is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the findings of staff and approve DSP-21039 and TCP2-032-07-02, along with the conditions as outlined in staff's report and as further modified by applicant exhibit number 1. And a big warm welcome to Mr. Wong.
Second.
We've got a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Commissioner Giraldo. Any discussion on the motion? No discussion. I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haller. Thank you, Mr. Wong.
This weekend.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Final item on our agenda, item 7. This is a detailed site plan. This is actually DET 2022-018 Bowie Marketplace. We have Mr. Gingles, who's representing the applicant. We have Mr. Shelley, who will be giving the staff report. Mr. Shelley, you don't get a kind introduction. I'm sorry, from Mr. Hunt. You've been around too long. We do not have anyone signed up to, oh, we do. We have Mr. Minor from the city of Bowie, who I believe is here. But let's start with staff for their, well, actually, let me, this is an evidentiary hearing. So we may have some folks who are signed up to speak. So I'd ask all persons intending to provide testimony, that does not include you, Mr. Gingles, but others should raise their right hand. You do solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Yes.
Okay, thanks everybody. Consider yourself sworn in, and I will now turn to Mr. Shelley for the staff presentation. Take it away.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, and I may not be new, but it's always a pleasure to speak in front of you and the other commissioners.
Thank you.
And good morning. For the record, my name is Andrew Shelley with the Urban Design Section. The item before you is item number 7, detailed site plan DET-2022-018 Bowie Marketplace, which proposes the development of 2 consolidated storage buildings with accessory outdoor storage and a car wash with an accessory maintenance shed. Staff is recommending approval with revised conditions as shown in Staff Exhibit 1 and further modified by Applicant Exhibit 1, which was provided by the applicant and received by the hearing deadline on May 23rd, 2023. Staff will discuss these revisions later in the presentation. Next slide, please. Site shown in red is located in Planning Area 71B in Council District 4. Next slide, please. The Bowie Marketplace site shown in red is located on the west side of Superior Lane, approximately 82 feet north of its intersection with Safety Turn. Next slide, please. Subject property is bordered to the north by MD 450, known as Annapolis Road, to the south by single-family detached dwellings in the residential single-family -65 or RSF-65 zone, to the east by other commercial property in the commercial general and office or CGO zone, and to the west by the Bowie Marketplace, by the Bowie Community Center in the CGO zone and single-family detached dwellings beyond in the RSF-65 zone. Next slide, please. Subject property shown in red is known as Parcel X12 and is located within the Bowie Marketplace Shopping Center. Parcel X12 contains approximately 10.53 acres with existing commercial space in the northern half of the parcel and a parking lot and green space in the southern half of the parcel. The limits of disturbance for this project is primarily within the southern portion of the parcel where the development will be located. Next slide, please. The subject property shown in purple contains no regulated environmental features, but condition 1GG was removed in Staff Exhibit 1 as it required the applicant to submit a copy of the approved erosion and sediment control plan prior to certification. The condition was replaced by condition 2 that requires the erosion and sediment control plan to be provided prior to approval of the first grading permit. Next slide, please. This map with the subject property shown in blue demonstrates the adjacent master plan rights-of-way. The Bowie Marketplace Shopping Center has frontage along MD 450. Next slide, please. The aerial demonstrates the existing Parcel X12 site, which is shown in blue. Existing commercial place is shown on the northern portion of Parcel X12, and the existing single-family detached dwellings are shown south of Parcel X12. Existing commercial structures and single-family detached dwellings are shown to the east of the site, and the City of Bowie's Community Center and adjacent park are shown to the west of the site. Next slide, please. This slide demonstrates the limits of disturbance of this detailed site plan, which is shown in red along with the surrounding uses to Parcel X12. A condition has been provided that revises the limits of the detailed site plan to include the entire Parcel X12 boundary and not just the portion of the site where the development is being proposed. Next slide, please. This aerial plan demonstrates the applicant's proposed Phase 1 of the project. However, the Phase 1 plan shown is not the same plan reviewed with the technical staff report. Instead, the applicant has provided a condition via applicant exhibit 1 that states the project will now be constructed in only 2 phases. The previously submitted phase 1 plan would be removed and the remaining project phases would be relabeled. Phase 1 is now scheduled to consist of the construction of a 132,000 square foot, 3-story consolidated storage building, an accessory maintenance shed and accessory outdoor storage area, and a 4,575 square foot car wash. Adequate landscape buffering has been provided on site, particularly along the southern property boundary to separate the proposed uses from the existing single-family detached dwellings. However, the applicant has requested alternative compliance from sections 4.7 and 4.8 of the 2018 Prince George's County Landscape Manual, which is analyzed further within the technical staff report. The applicant has demonstrated that the site layout is consistent with the general plan and the relevant master plan, subject to 2 conditions, and is analyzed within pages 29 to 30 of the technical staff report. Staff notes that Council Bill CB-011-2023 now prohibits the consolidated storage use in the CGO zone. However, Section 3 of the Council Bill allows the development to proceed as the applicant completed a pre-application neighborhood meeting prior to April 1st, 2023. Next slide, please. This aerial plan demonstrates the applicant's proposed phase 2 of the project. Phase 2 is scheduled to replace the outdoor storage use with a 142,800 square foot, 4-story consolidated storage building. Next slide, please. This development project is subject to the neighborhood compatibility standards listed within the zoning ordinance. An analysis of the detailed site plan's conformance to these standards is provided on pages 25 and 26 of the technical staff report. The graphic shows the portions of the proposed development located within 200 feet of the single-family detached dwellings shown in purple and 150 feet shown in red. The consolidated storage buildings have been designed to be stepped down and resemble a multifamily residential building in the portion of the property that is within 200 feet of the single-family detached dwellings located south of parcel X12. The neighborhood compatibility requirements limit the number of new parking spaces that can be provided for development. The applicant is overparked by 23 spaces in phase 1 and 4 spaces in phase 2. Therefore, staff has provided a condition, now known as condition 1X, to require the number of parking spaces to not exceed the maximum permitted by the neighborhood compatibility standards. Next slide, please. The applicant has requested alternative compliance from section 4.7 and 4.8 of the landscape manual. An analysis of the alternative compliance request is located within pages 31 through 34 of the technical staff report. The planning director recommends approval of the alternative compliance request subject to 2 conditions within the technical staff report. Next slide, please. This slide provides the signage and site details for the property. An analysis of the development signage and site details is provided on pages 12, 13, 23, 24, and 27 of the technical staff report. The condition in the technical staff report regarding the removal of a freestanding sign, condition 1T, shall be removed and replaced in accordance to staff exhibit 1. The revised condition states that the proposed consolidated storage freestanding sign shall be replaced with a gateway sign in accordance with the zoning ordinance. The applicant should note that staff expect the signage provided shall be designed to include appropriate historical interpretation or wayfinding signage to conform with the relevant master plan as conditioned within the technical staff report. Next slide, please. The applicant provides an open space set-aside exhibit which shall be revised to conform to the zoning ordinance. The applicant is required to revise the open space set-aside calculations shown as analyzed and conditioned on page 23 of the technical staff report. Next slide, please. The next 2 slides represent the circulation plans submitted for both phases by the applicant. Staff provides an analysis of the circulation plans on pages 19 through 23 of the technical staff report. The circulation plans identify 3 oversized vehicular movements. These include a proposed tractor-trailer movement, which is shown in blue, a proposed box truck movement, which is shown in red, and a proposed garbage truck movement, which is shown in green. Staff find that the proposed site circulation is acceptable, subject to conditions contained within pages 37 through 41 of the technical staff report, which include enhancing pedestrian connectivity throughout the site. Next slide, please. And next slide again, please. The following two slides indicate the loading space sizes that were proposed by the applicant as part of a request for a modification to development standards. The applicant proposes 3 loading spaces in phase 1. Next slide, please. And 6 loading spaces in phase 2. After the publishing of the technical staff report, staff in consultation with legal counsel determined that the applicant is not required to provide loading spaces for consolidated storage use, and that the request for modification for development standards is no longer necessary. Therefore, staff elected to remove condition 1L and revise condition 1Z to clarify how the provided oversized parking striped areas may contribute to the parking calculation within Staff Exhibit 1. However, staff recommends the Planning Board further revise the new condition, now known as condition 1Y, to require the applicant provide these oversized spaces to allow 30-foot long box trucks that the applicant has indicated will visit the site in the circulation plan with a location to park. In this case, the 2 oversized parking spaces along the building's north frontage can accommodate these vehicles. These spaces are 30 feet long and 33 feet long, respectively. Staff is less concerned about tractor trailers, as staff in consultation with the applicant determined that this facility would be primarily utilized by local residents and small businesses. The tractor trailers shown on the circulation plan would primarily be associated with the existing commercial shopping center uses. An analysis of staff's findings is available within Staff Exhibit 1. Next slide, please. The car wash will be constructed in phase one of concrete and metal painted panels in multiple shades of red. The building will be rectangular and include 2 towers. The front elevation northwest faces the interior parking lot and features multiple storefront windows with a glass roof. The side elevations feature the ingress and egress door for the vehicles to be washed. A canopy is provided over the car wash entrance shown in the southwest elevation. Vehicles will enter the car wash from the north and proceed south. Next slide, please. The rear elevation of the car wash faces Superior Lane and includes the same building materials. A signage plan set was received for the car wash and examined within the technical staff report. Staff recommends approval of the provided car wash signage subject to conditions within pages 37 through 41 of the technical staff report. Next slide, please. The northern elevation, or the top of this slide, of the consolidated storage building constructed in phase 1 will face the existing Bowie Marketplace Shopping Center, and the western elevation, shown in the bottom of the slide, will face the City of Bowie's Community Center and Park. The northern elevation has been constructed to resemble the existing Bowie Marketplace Shopping Center. This includes brick columns, cornices, metal awnings, parapets, and a tan/beige color palette. Next slide, please. The southern elevation of the consolidated storage building, shown at the top of the slide, constructed in phase 1, will face existing single-family homes, and the eastern elevation, shown in the bottom of the slide, will face Superior Lane. The southern elevation has been constructed to resemble a multifamily residential building and has a lower height than the remainder of the building. The southern elevation meets the required transparency standards for each floor that faces the existing single-family dwellings with a variety of windows spread across the facade. Next slide, please. The addition of the second consolidated storage building enhances the site's design by centering the entrance and attached building signage with the existing Bowie Marketplace drive aisle. The building facade is broken up with additional brick columns, designating new entrances and arches. The building will be constructed of a mixture of brick, concrete, and exterior installation finishing system, which is commonly referred to as synthetic stucco. Next slide, please. The southern elevation is extended with the construction of the second consolidated storage building, which is stepped down within 200 feet of the single-family detached dwellings located to the south of the development. The proposed building consists of 4 stories in all areas, except this location where it is only 3 stories. The additional construction maintains the multifamily residential facility aesthetic with a variety of windows spread across the facade. A parapet is utilized to distinguish between the new building's elevations. Next slide, please. The provided architecture of the maintenance shed will be consistent and compatible with the proposed consolidated storage buildings and existing Bowie Marketplace Shopping Center. Next slide, please. In conclusion, staff finds the applicant's site layout to be acceptable subject to the conditions contained within pages 37 through 41 of the technical staff report and further modified by Staff Exhibit 1 and Applicant Exhibit 1. Staff Exhibit 1 removes or revises conditions 1L, 1T, 1Z, and 1GG from the published technical staff report and proceeds to relabel the remaining conditions accordingly. Applicant Exhibit 1 recommends one additional condition labeled as 1II and is supported by staff. The newly labeled condition 1Y shall also be revised to require the applicant to maintain and not remove the provided oversized parking spaces. Lastly, staff would note for the record that the City of Bowie supports the approval of this application subject to 2 conditions, which are included within the technical staff report, and the city supports staff's findings. Therefore, the urban design section recommends that the planning board adopt the findings of this report and approve detailed site plan DET-2022-018 and alternative compliance ACL-2022-004, subject to the recommended conditions as well as the revised conditions shown in Staff Exhibit 1 and further modified by Applicant Exhibit 1. Condition 1Y shall also be revised to require the applicant to maintain and not remove the provided oversized parking spaces. This would conclude staff's presentation. Thank you, and I look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Shelley. Commissioners, I have a few questions, but commissioners, any of you have questions for staff?
I do. Just one clarifying question. Mr. Shelley, you consistently reference staff exhibit number 1. What we received as staff exhibit number 1 was actually Council Bill 11, 2023, and staff exhibit number 2 is your memo dated May 23rd. I just want to make sure we're referencing the right exhibit.
That is correct. My apologies. It should be Staff Exhibit 2.
Okay, I was tracking it as you were saying it, but I just wanted to make sure it was correct for the record. Thank you,
Yes,
Mr. Shelley.
Thank you.
And
my
good to see
apologies.
you as well this morning. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Other questions? So I've got a few quick ones. One is, I just want to make sure I heard correctly, based upon council action, this is likely to be one of the last consolidated storages that we're going to see in the CGO, right? Do we have any data on, is this the last, or are there 1 or 2 more, or what's the deal? Do we know?
Mr. Chairman, for the record, James Hunt with the Development Review Division. We do have maybe 1 or 2 more additional cases that are in the pipeline. So there are not that many more left to review for the planning board.
Okay, thank you. The other thing is, Mr. Shelley, you mentioned the pedestrian connectivity, and I'm not sure which slide is the best way to show that, but can you walk me through very briefly how the pedestrian connectivity is going to work?
Yeah, let's go to slide 10, please, if we could. Again, for the record, Andrew Shelley with the Urban Design section. We believe that additional pedestrian connectivity can be added via some walkways in terms of near the existing drive aisle. So some additional crosswalks to connect the consolidated storage site to the existing Bowie Marketplace shopping center. So these crosswalks would be provided just to the north of the outdoor storage area. We're also, as part of the reduction in parking, the applicant is also going to be analyzing if there are methods to provide additional connectivity between the consolidated storage use and the car wash use. And I hope that somewhat answers your question.
It does. I mean, I think what I was struck by is I don't know enough about the design of this to know whether this development is essentially cutting off pedestrians from the south, from the single family home neighborhoods in the south to Bowie Marketplace. And is that what the intention of the pedestrian access is to make sure there's still pedestrian circulation that will allow?
Yes, Mr. Chair, with the addition of this site, one current access point is also being removed along Superior Lane. That access point would be, could we actually go back one slide, please? It's a little easier to see on the aerial. Or back one more, please. My apologies. So this access point is roughly where it says lane on the aerial shown. So that access point is going to be removed, and the sidewalk will be constructed in its place. And we also asked the applicant to consider adding a crosswalk along the portion of Sage Lane to further connect the existing sidewalk infrastructure to what's being proposed with the consolidated storage, to further allow a cut through and to the existing Bowie Marketplace, and also allow an additional pathway to get to the Bowie Community Center.
Oh, okay, that was my point.
Yeah, all right, that's helpful. I appreciate it. Sounds like you're being attentive to, and maybe we can hear from the applicant on that as well when we get to the applicant. Last question I have was, I just want to make sure I hear you all again. Condition 1Y is to require the applicant to provide oversize, and pardon me, I kept on hearing parking spaces, but in my head I was thinking loading spaces.
Yes.
One, both?
So it's they're considered oversized parking spaces because the applicant is not required to provide loading spaces, and the spaces being provided do not all meet the requirements for a standard loading space for this use. So the loading spaces provided, however, do allow the most common large vehicle visiting the site, which would be the box truck, which can be up to 30 feet wide, and at least 2 of those provided 6 spaces would be able to accommodate those box truck vehicles. With those spaces being removed, as shown on the circulation plan, those vehicles that are visiting the site would no longer have a location to park. And again, we're less concerned about the tractor trailers, as those have been in staff's findings and also in consultation with the applicant. Those are more going to be associated with the existing Bowie Marketplace use. And the consolidated storage itself will be primarily used within the local neighborhood, and not so much big, large moves from various places.
Gotcha. So how many oversized parking spaces is built into the condition, and do we know where they're going to be located? Where you're proposing them?
So if you could go back to slide number 19, please. So what we're requesting is that the applicant just maintain the loading spaces that are being, or not the, my apologies, the oversized parking spaces that are being provided on this plan, and that the 2 to the northern facade, at the northern elevation of the property, which is shown in the top of the slide, those are at least 30 feet, and those would be able to accommodate those the largest box trucks that would be present, those 30-foot wide ones.
Okay, all right, thank you, Ms. Shelley. I don't have any other questions. Commissioners, again, any other questions for staff? No questions?
I have none, no.
Okay, there are no questions. Let's turn to the applicant. Mr. Gingles, the floor is yours. You can introduce your team as you feel, yourself and your team as you feel appropriate. Take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. For the record, Andre Gingles, attorney with offices in Laurel, Maryland. So first of all, an appreciative thank you to Mr. Shelley. This is my initial case under the new ordinance, perhaps my final case, but appreciate him working with us as we've gone through several different interpretive issues throughout. Here with me today are Mr. Brian Berman and Mr. Kevin Berman of Berman Enterprises. They are a third-generation entity, which I've been delighted to work with probably over about 3 decades on various projects in the county, in Bowie, Laurel, New Carrollton, all of which have come before this planning board. And they've included significant office, single family, multifamily development, as well as industrial space. I just want to note, so this got started in 2014, and a large part of the existing center did not come before this planning board because at the time the property was zoned CSC. With the support of the city of Bowie, we were able to demolish the Bowie Marketplace, bring in predominantly new retail development, including what was then the second Harris Teeter grocery store in the county. Subsequently, we did modify, again, with the support of the Bowie, some of the existing zoning ordinance so that we could keep one of the well-established desired community businesses, which was a service use at the rear of the center in a portion of parcel X12 where we are now. And then subsequently, Bowie worked with us to modify the ordinance again to allow multifamily development, essentially in the area where we're now proposing the consolidated storage. The board did get that case. That case was approved by the board. There was opposition from the community that was at the rear. And subsequently, Berman's did decide for a variety of reasons, including the litigation that was done by the single family community to the rear, to forestall and withdraw our development plans to do multifamily at that location. We watched as the new zoning ordinance came online, looked at potential uses, and it's difficult to place retail at the rear of a shopping center. We had a big service use back there, and so we began to look for service types of uses that we thought could exist in the rear. Came up with the consolidated storage. The market was looking to be there. Worked to design buildings that would address the issues other than the fact that folks didn't want multifamily, but to address sort of the size and height and aesthetic issues of having such a building at the rear of the center. With that, we proceeded under the new ordinance with the outreach meeting, the Bowie stakeholder meeting, and then hearings before the city's advisory planning commission and city council collectively, which result in Bowie's recommendation, which their representative will present to you later today. As I noted, Berman's been in the county for a lot of years. We're long-term, or they are a long-term holder of real estate. And as a result, we try and do things basically to make sure we retain and enhance what we're doing in the area. We've had an opportunity in terms of working with staff, obviously, to review the initial staff report and several discussions with them about the supplemental memo. It was during that discussion that we explained that we were going to be actually doing what was then listed as phase 1 and 2 together as a single phase 1, and what was then phase 3 would become the phase 2. And so those changes we will make when we submit certified plans if this proposal is approved. Staff did mention, Mr. Shelley did mention the exhibit that we had worked with him on, and I think they're both in support of the condition as well as the finding that we're proposing as a part of that. The last thing I guess I want to mention, and if you are looking at, actually, you can see it pretty well on the exhibit there. You can see a lot of the new retail development that exists at the top of what is parcel X12. We had talked with staff just to confirm that there are two provisions in the current ordinance which sort of explain how, if there needs to be some amendments or revisions to that development, how they would be handled. We discussed with staff about putting on a potential condition for that. Staff thinks that it's better handled by note, and that satisfies us. And that note is going to be sort of cite the two provisions which explain in the instances where any of those revisions or amendments would be handled pursuant to the prior ordinance under which they were developed, or if they met the exemptions for not needing an amendment to a detailed site plan under the new ordinance. The only sort of remaining thing is, and if I could, I did have some discussions with staff this morning about what is going to become one Y. And as I understand it, the desire is that we keep those areas that are not legally loading spaces. But I was trying to understand again whether or not that is or is not, those what may be 6 spaces will or will not be part of the applicant's count for parking spaces. The reason it is somewhat of an issue, as staff noted, we're already somewhat overparked. Legally, this use does not require loading spaces. And we're doing things essentially for the potential benefit of customers that come there. But we are concerned about whether or not those are going to be counted toward the parking spaces. It may make it more difficult in terms of eliminating the spaces and what areas we would go to do that. And then just the second thing, as regards pedestrian connectivity, we do want to be careful as we move forward in that. We don't want to sort of create a situation by making it easy for people who otherwise we want to park in the front of the center to use parking in the rear and then walk around. And then 2, for traffic purposes, we want to be careful about where we add that connectivity because of the flow, because those are service uses, and particularly with the car wash. We don't want to create too many instances where we're in effect creating particular hazards with regard to pedestrians walking through areas or too close or proximate to areas where there are constantly cars moving around, both in terms of attending the consolidated storage as well as the car wash that's there. So we acknowledge the opportunity to create that, but we also are going to be very careful about not creating instances that we think simply, and we have a service facility to what would be sort of the west as well. And we just, again, don't want to create too many instances of people walking through areas where there's a fair amount of traffic for those service uses at the rear. With that, Mr. Chairman, I have one of the Bermans may want to make a few comments. I also have GLW, our engineer representatives here today, in case there are questions that they need to answer. So, Mr. Berman, if I may allow him to speak.
Of course. Which Mr. Berman?
Kevin O'Brien, I think one will do, whichever one.
Sure, I'd be happy to speak. For the record, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Board. For the record, Brian Berman, one of the principals of the applicant. I'll be brief. Berman Enterprises, of which the applicant is an affiliate, prides itself in its approach to development, working with communities and viewing ourselves as long-term generational stakeholders in communities. Bowie Marketplace is an excellent example of this. This project was acquired in the fourth quarter of 2013 and was at that time a rundown eyesore attracting crime, vagrancy, and offensive graffiti. Shortly after acquisition, the city reached out to us, to Berman Enterprises, expressing its interest that we accelerate the timeline for the development. In November of 2014, an agreement regarding incentives for the redevelopment of Bowie Marketplace Shopping Center was executed between the applicant and the city of Bowie. This agreement contemplated a mixed-use development consisting of a first-class grocery-anchored shopping center on the northern portion of the overall site and a luxury apartment building on the southern portion of the overall site. Various public hearings were held and the project commenced with much fanfare in 2015. After the mall was demolished and the retail was substantially underway, opposition to the second phase began to surface, which crescendoed in public hearings attended by many, many people in opposition to the apartments and in the recall of a city council member for this district. The current detailed site plan before you is the alternative development plan for this portion of the project. And I will point out that we have worked very hard with the city of Bowie and its stakeholders, and the planning board staff and city council, as you heard, have all recommended approval. And we're happy to answer any questions, either of us.
Thank you, Mr. Berman. Commissioners, questions for Mr. Gingles, Mr. Berman, any other members of the applicant's team?
Just to
Seeing none, the only
clarify,
one-
the
Go ahead,
yeah,
Commissioner Washington.
and forgive me if I heard incorrectly, but Mr. Giggles, I thought in your comments, it was kind of an open-ended question with regards to the parking spaces, what counts and what does not count. I didn't know if that was a question by staff or was that just a statement of comment, or is that something we need to resolve? So,
Just a second. Well, I guess two things. One,
We lose you?
I think we did. I dropped off my screen, so.
Andre, if I might just speak out, and also Kevin can speak to this as well, just so everyone understands what we're trying to achieve. So we understand that there are regulations limiting the amount of parking, and we understand that, and we're doing our best to comply with that. At the same time, the very popular service-oriented business that's in the rear of the center, they are very successful, Cheney Automotive, and as a result, they require quite a bit more parking than would typically be required of somebody who's not as successful. And so we're just trying to make sure that we don't end up in a situation where we can't provide them parking somewhere on the site, even though we don't require it, because technically their parking is included in the northern parking lot. Obviously, it's much more convenient for them if they can continue to have some place. And so to the extent, I think, unless I'm speaking out of turn, to the extent that these, I'm not going to call them loading spaces, but these large parking spaces for loading can not be counted in our parking count, it will make us easier to comply. Kevin, am I saying that correctly?
Yes, and with those oversized spaces in the revised condition 1Y, we'd appreciate, as the certification is going to require a little bit of wiggling of the site plan, that we keep a little bit of flexibility on the exact location of those as we go through the certification process.
Thank you both. And I guess I would ask as a follow, Mr. Shelley, are you comfortable with the revision as stated? Does it provide for that flexibility? You're muted.
Thank you. My apologies. For the record, again, Andrew Shelley from the Urban Design section. The revision as stated just requires the applicant to maintain the provided oversized parking spaces. So I believe the condition would have to be restated to simply state that the applicant provide, and we could either the planning board could decide on a specific number, or just the planning board could revise the condition to state instead that just the applicant provide oversized parking spaces to be reviewed and determined by the urban design section, something along those lines. And the applicant could then submit the oversized parking spaces that they feel are acceptable, and staff could agree or disagree and ask for an additional revision.
Okay, thank you. I mean, that sounds reasonable to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I apologize, Mr. Chairman, I had a slight technical difficulty. So condition 1Y is now proposed to read exactly how?
We're still working that out.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
And
Mr. Shelley, do you want to
we think
restate
that
that?
number is roughly the number. We just want to make sure as we handle certain other issues involving open space or green space, that we are able to move those spaces around. But we also did not think that they ought to be counted as parking spaces. So those were the two.
Right, and Mr. Gingles, where we were leaning, or I believe staff was leaning, is recommending a now new revised 1I, which speaks to just providing oversized parking spaces without a specific number, and working with the urban design section and staff on the final determination and location of those.
I want to make sure I understand, Commissioner Washington, because I understood it to be that there would be a specific number, but the location would be, to be determined.
Okay, then, yeah, Mr. Shelley should clarify.
Both of those work for us.
Yeah,
both of those.
Yes.
Work for the applicant. We're comfortable with the number again. We just need the ability, as we look at the redesign, to be able to move them around. The larger issue is whether or not they actually count as parking spaces, whatever number we provide.
Okay.
So, in terms of if they count as parking spaces, I would turn that, I'll turn that question over to our counsel, Ms. Coleman or Mr. Hunt, but I believe they would still count as parking spaces from my interpretation of the ordinance, but I would like either of them to weigh in on that question.
For the record, James Hunt with the Development Review Division. Yes, they would count as parking spaces on the site. Just kind of clarify there.
So,
and what I'm hearing from staff is that the concern is more, and I hear you around the cherished juice in the backside, but staff is pretty clear that this is overparked.
Yes, it's overparked, and we have to do reductions, and we will have to modify some of the site items. I guess then we would just ask, as a final part of that condition, that the number be 4 to 6 spaces.
The number be, I'm sorry, Mr. Gingles, I did not hear you.
4 to 6, or
Oh,
at
okay.
least, 4 to 6 oversized parking spaces, or at least 4 oversized parking spaces. And that way, as we're trying to deal with the multiplicity of issues, both in terms of not making sure that we are not overparked, because that's adding 6 spaces to an already overparked requirement. So we may need to reduce a loading space if we don't find it necessary in order to meet that requirement.
Okay, thank you.
And with that, that's all we have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Gingles.
I have no concern with that, Mr. Chairman. I would just ask if Mr. Shelley could take a first attempt at stating what the now third revised 1Y might read. And of course, I think depending on how this goes, then working with council, they can fine tune it to make sure that it accommodates this discussion, so.
yes, thank you again. For the record, Andrew Shelley with the Urban Design section. So the third revision of Condition 1Y shall now read, Condition 1Y shall be revised to require the applicant to provide 4 to 6 oversized parking spaces to be reviewed and approved by the Urban Design section of the Development Review Division of the Prince George's County Planning Department.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Shelley.
Commissioners, are we comfortable with this?
I am.
Okay.
Yes, at this point.
Could I just ask a point of clarification? So Lisa Coleman, Senior Counsel for the record, is it the desire of staff that at least 2 of those be the 30-foot wide spaces?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Coleman. Yes, it is the desire of staff that at least 2 of them be 30 feet long. So I may need to take a 4th stab at it to add that into the condition.
So while we're coming up with that revised 1Y, unless there's any other questions to the applicant, I want to turn to Mr. Minor as well, or anyone else from the public who wishes to speak on this. I don't think we have anyone else signed up to speak except for Mr. Minor, but Mr. Minor, I'll turn it over to you. The floor is yours if you could introduce yourself for the record.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Board. I'm Joe Minert. I'm the City of Bowie Planning Director, here to support the staff recommendation as amended for this detailed site plan. I wanted to just let you know that the City Council did hold, or the city held several public meetings, including a stakeholders meeting, which was held virtually back in October. And we had over 50 people attend that meeting to gain information about the proposal. And as we moved into our hearing phase, which was only a month or so ago, we only had a couple of residents coming out. I think it indicates the satisfaction of the community who was so much against the residential development with this product. And I also informed our advisory board about Mr. Gingel's statement of justification, very detailed statement of justification. I apologize.
Go ahead.
I have a phone ringing in the background, Mr. Chairman. Just 1 second.
Not a problem, Mr. Minor.
Yes, what I was saying was Mr. Engel's very detailed justification statement, I think, is a good example of how all of the standards in the new ordinance really are very demanding for site development. And, using that as a learning exercise, I think the city really understood that there are a lot more stringent standards in the ordinance, including the neighborhood compatibility standards, which you've seen today. And I think that it really is working in the direction that the county council wanted to go with more sensitive development of sites. What I wanted to mention also is that the city recommended 2 conditions, and those are included in condition 2 of your staff report, item II and item JJ. And I just wanted to speak to those briefly to explain item II regarding a crosswalk recommendation. Is really focused on the area north of the phase 1 building, between that and the back of the existing retail building. And what we really were concerned about was the safety of people walking through that portion of the expansive paved area. And we had recommended that at a minimum, the developer provide a striping of the lane width so that it was clear where the vehicles would travel in that area, and that would allow some margin of safety for people that are walking outside of that travel lane. And so I wanted to be sure that that site plan does include that paved or that stripe lane in that area. The second condition that we had, which is your number 2 JJ, was related to stormwater management and providing some pervious paving on the site. The applicant did agree that they would examine that, but I'm not sure that we've seen any further investigation of it. But the 2 locations that we had recommended was south of the storage building. There's a stormwater management facility, bioretention facility that runs along the southern property line. This is a less traveled portion of the site, so that drive aisle there might be an ideal location for pervious paving. And then also we recommended the use of grass pavers in the parking area that's located between the storage building and the car wash. So I just wanted to provide that elaboration so the board could understand what the city was looking for. And again, we recommend approval of the detailed site plan with those conditions of staff. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Minor. Commissioners, we'll hear from the applicant and staff on these the points that Mr. Minor brought forward, but any questions for Mr. Minor? Commissioner Geraldo,
I have a question. So with the long driveways and the cars circulating, has any consideration been given to maybe putting some speed bumps? Or is it as another safety measure?
That was not part of, that was not part of the city's recommendation. I suppose it could be included if the board wanted to do that.
All right, let's hold that question and bring it back to the applicant. Other questions for Mr. Minor? All right, so thank you very much. So let's turn back to actually, let's go back to Mr. Shelley and see if we can get the 5th revision on 1Y.
All right, thank you again, Mr. Chair. For the record, again, Andrew Shelley.
Mr. Shelley, one sec. I think Mr. Gingles may have a comment on
my apologies.
The current iteration of 1Y.
My apologies, Mr. Gingles.
I'm sorry for this last revision, but there's a difference of opinion among the engineers and the applicant and just all of the consultants. But we think it would be safe if it just indicated there shall be at least 4. And it's because as we move to handle the parking and the various things, we may determine that we want to add more, and so we don't want to be limited. I think unless staff thinks there's a minimum number that's different, we want to just have it as a minimum number, whatever suits staff.
So you're saying at least 4, and at least oversized 2 of them would be 30 feet long or 30 feet wide. It's 30 feet long, right?
And staff noted that they wanted at least a couple of them to be, I wanted to say 30 feet. So, and if they want to add that language, that's fine as well.
Okay, so it sounds like Mr. Shelley, and I imagine commissioners, we have no concerns with this, that it needs to be not 4 to 6, but at least 4.
Yes, understood. Again, for the record, Andrew Shelley with the Urban Design section. The new revision, condition 1Y shall be revised to require the applicant to provide at least 4 oversized parking spaces with 2 oversized parking spaces that are at least 12 feet wide and 30 feet long to be reviewed and approved by the Urban Design section of the Development Review Division of the Prince George's County Planning Department.
And that's
right, going once, going twice. All right, sounds like we have a condition. So the other issue that I have for you, Mr. Gingles,
yes,
Mr. and Mr. Berman, is that what Mr. Minor brought forward. Where are you with the city of Bowie's conditions related to the striped lanes and the stormwater management and pervious parking, pervious pavers?
We both accepted those. We accepted those at the hearing. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And just one last comment, and I thought it was Commissioner Giraldo that I heard about bumps or speed bumps, which particularly in those circulation lanes and when you're going to have trucks. And trucks, we do it. One of the reasons you make those turning radiuses and things like that are tighter or to slow traffic. But it is a bit of an issue to have those large trucks going over bumps and things like that. So we prefer not to have those in those circulation routes.
Because there are trucks that are loaded with
eggs,
a variety of objects too. Commissioner, I kind of side with this one because I think if I were driving the truck, I you know.
I mean, I don't understand what the issue is with the trucks unless they're delivering eggs.
For the record, Brian Berman with the applicant. I think that is particularly the issue. The Harris Teeter in particular has rights to drive through the rear parking lot with respect to their loading and delivery. And their lease would preclude those exact issues. So we look to other methods to slow traffic because of the eggs on board their trucks and whatever else they have. We're using eggs kind of tongue in cheek.
That's fair. Thank you.
So you called it, Commissioner Giraldo. It actually is eggs.
I know.
It actually is.
Okay. Other questions, concerns, other things that we need to address around this? It sounds like we're all aligned. Mr. Gingles, I'll give you and your team the final word. Any rebuttal and close?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sounds like a no. All right.
I think we have it all. Thank you.
Good. All right. So we are good to go. I'll close the hearing. And commissioners, what's your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the findings of staff to include the revised findings as outlined in staff exhibit number 2, as well as revised in and outlined in applicant exhibit number 1, and approve DET-2022-018 and ACL-2022-004, along with the conditions as outlined in staff's report and as further modified by staff exhibit number 2 with the addition of new condition number 2, and then as further modified by applicant exhibit number 1. And finally, ensure the inclusion of, I believe, the 5th revision of condition 1Y as read into the record so eloquently by Mr. Shelley.
I'll
Second, and the award goes to Commissioner.
Indeed. We have a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Vice Chair Bailey, I believe. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
Vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye. Now I know why she got the pin.
And Commissioner Dorner.
Aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 5-0. Thanks to everybody for your work on this case, top to bottom. And I'm glad we can come to some common ground on it. Mr. Hunt, any further business to come before the planning board today?
Mr. Chairman, there are no additional business items before the planning board today. Have a great holiday weekend, everyone.
Good holiday weekend, everybody. Without objection, we are adjourned.
Thank you.